Hello guys, welcome back to the shack for another cook. And today we're doing a little bit of an experiment. First time I've done it, but we're going to give it a try. And that is hot and fast beef ribs. So traditionally beef ribs would be done low and slow like most of the other cuts. But today we're going to do it slightly hotter. So we're going to aim to cook them around 150 degrees C for the first little while anyway. And then we're going to wrap them up. At that point we can ramp the temperatures a little bit more. But it's something I'm just going to have to play by ear as we go through, but I want to see what they turn out like. I've done them low and slow before. I do like beef ribs, so I want to try the hot and fast method just to see what we can get those times down to. Now, it's a relatively small rack, so it should cook pretty fast anyway. However, the aim is to see what we can get texture-wise on the outside and tenderness on the inside. So we're actually using the WSM for this. I have it fired up at the minute with a full chimney starter of lit coals, plus there's a few unlit coals in the bottom which I've dumped that in on top of. I have left the water bowl dry, just covered it in a little bit of foil. All vents are fully open and it's sitting currently at around 160 or so it should stabilise down slightly once we knock some of those vents down. But for now, I want to get a little bit of hot sauce onto these ribs and we're going to season them up just with salt as we're doing them pretty fast. For the first part anyway, we can add a few more seasonings later on. The main thing is to get smoke onto these and say that little bit of salt. This is the double oak smoked hot sauce from Dr. Trouble. Should go pretty nice on this. There's a lot of lemon juice in this. Nice kick of chili. It's not their hottest one. I think it'll work well for what we need it for. It's really only to act as a bit of a binder for the salt to stick to. So I'm not going to do anything on the bottom of these. We still have the membrane, but there's not a lot down there that we're going to be eating. So there's no real reason to do much to it. So after that's done, I'll set this a little bit coarser and we're going to just give them a covering of salt. Okay, that should be good. So that's those ready to go on. I'll move over to the WSM now. We haven't put the smoke wood in yet because as soon as we put them in there, it's going to start smoking. So to get the maximum out of the chunks, we'll put these on, then throw the chunks in, and they'll start smoking instantly. Pop our door off. So we're going with two chunks today. I have one of oak and one of hickory. It should be enough to smoke these for the first while. Like I said, we're going fast, so they'll probably seat up pretty quick. So we'll just pop them into the coals and push them over into the centre. Make sure they're nestled in there well, that they'll smoulder. Then we'll stick our door back on and that should start to give off a nice smoke. So I'm going to give them an hour. At 150, I'm not sure timings wise, we're just going to have to play it by ear. But I want to check them around an hour's time to see how they're pulling back from the bone, see how the colour's doing, see what smoke they're taking on. At that point I might wrap. I'll see what the outsides are like. But I do think they are going to need a period of wrapping. I'm not going to go all the way without wrapping. So we'll get them into the foil. At that point we can maybe add a little bit more flavour to them, but we'll play it by ear. This is all about experiment and keeping our fingers crossed that they are not a disaster. What's the worst that could happen? All right, it has been 1 hour 35 minutes and I have to say I've been well impressed with how the WSM has held up at that temperature. I actually had a little bit of a temperature spike. It went up to around 170. I had to knock the vents down at the bottom. So I have one fully closed and one shut down about halfway, so 1.5 full vents open. And I have to say they are looking pretty good at the minute. I have probed them for temp, so if we stick in, they're sitting around 75. Down this sort of thinner end now, they're slightly higher, around 80 or so. But I'm happy enough with the colour on them. So it's time to wrap them up. Starting to pull back from the bones a little bit, which is what we want. But they still, probe's going in quite nice, but it is not really like completely probe tender yet. So we're going to wrap them. Now you might have noticed from the clips, they you haven't really built up that sort of low and slow smoked bark. They're not going really black bark wise. They have got a nice red mahogany colour to them from the smoke, but we're not building up that bark that we would with a low and slow. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of difference that makes. So if I grab my tongs and we'll try and get these off and onto the foil. Try not to rip it. Stick the lid back on there for now. So they're still pretty soft. There's a little bit of a crust forming on the outside, but as I say, you're not going to get that bark from the low and slow. What I'm going to do at this point is add on another little bit of rub. So I'm using Montreal steak seasoning. I didn't put this on at the start just because there's so many herbs and spices in there. Cooking at that hot temperature, I didn't want to risk burning anything to it. But we can go ahead and add it on now. And as this cooks down and steams inside, that will hopefully add plenty of flavour to it. So let's try and do this without ripping the foil. I've double wrapped them. There's 2 layers on here just to try and avoid the bones puncturing through. And right, so we're going to put that on again. Keep the temperature relatively the same. If it starts to climb a little bit, I'm not too worried. So we'll keep it around 150, 160-ish. I'll come back and check them every 30 minutes or so, because once they're wrapped up like this, I don't honestly think they're going to take too much longer. So we might be looking at 2.5 hours, but we'll need to keep going in with a thermopen, probing them just to see how they feel. And once they're nice and tender, we'll lift them off and give them a try. So we'll take the lid off again. I will lift our parcel over, set it on, lid back on. And at this point, I'm going to go ahead and open up those vents all the way. So if the temperature wants to rise, it can rise. All right, so we're going to let them go until they're done. Temperature should be sitting in the 90s whenever they're tender, but again, it's all about feel. So once they get there, I'll explain a little bit about what you're looking for, and we will slice them up and give them a taste. I hope this works, because 2.5 hour, 3 hour beef ribs will be a massive advantage. It's time saving. It turns it into sort of a long roast rather than a low and slow. I'm interested to see what we're sacrificing though. Okay, we actually did it. Pretty much 2.5 hours, bang on the button. I checked them a couple of times, and up in this portion here, they were nice and soft. They were probing really well. Down around here, there was a little bit of a tight spot, so I left them be. That was around the 2 hours, 15 minute mark. But another 15 minutes, they've been probing nice and tender. So I lifted them off, left them wrapped in their foil, and I let them rest for probably around 30 minutes or so. So they're still steaming out here because it's so cold. But there's only one thing left to do. They're nice crispy edges on them. Not like burnt out dry crispy edges, and not low and slow bark either. There's still a nice little bit of jiggle to them. Bones have come away nicely. Time to carve some up and see what they taste like. Guys, I actually think it worked. These look super moist. There's a little bit of a weird fat cap on top of them, but apart from that, They look amazing. I'm gonna try and get it off the bone here. Right. Take a wee slice off. See what it tastes like. Man, we could be on to a winner. Loads of salt in there. I like that about beef ribs. So I think putting that salt on at the start was the right idea. I actually have not too bad of a smoke ring. I didn't think it was going to be as big as Low and Slow, but there is still definitely red around the edges here where the meat is, so there's definitely smoke flavour on them, that's for sure. Yeah, still a little bit of a bite to them. I wouldn't say they're maybe just as tender as Low and Slow ribs would be, but they are so tasty. And I would say that's probably half the time that I would normally do ribs in. So a rack this size, pretty small. I would normally do 6-7 hours is usually enough to get them done. But for a 2.5 hour cook on a rack of beef ribs, I was expecting them to be inedible. I've cooked ribs for 12 odd hours before and they were worse than this. Had to grab hot sauce. Give it a little try. Pour a little bit out onto the bench. Another slice. Dab it in the hot sauce. Oh, now we're talking. Right. So, what have we learned? One, WSM can sit pretty rock steady at those higher temperatures. After we wrapped the ribs, it went up to about 165 or so. I just let it ride and it's still sitting at 165. That's with one chimney starter. After 2.5 hours, I suppose you would expect it still to be there. The briquettes are supposed to last for at least 3. But I thought I'd be fighting it a lot more than I did. So WSM works a treat for that. And 2.5 hour beef ribs, 3 if you count the resting time, are an absolute winner. As I say, we aren't really going to get that bark on the outside of them, but as far as flavour goes and as smoked meat goes, that is more than acceptable. Next time you've a rack of shorties, 2.5 hours, give it a try. So let me know what you think. If you've tried hot and fast beef ribs, maybe we can get them even faster, maybe 2.5 hours is slow. Leave a comment down below, let me know if you've any questions about it. Happy to answer them. Huge thanks to all my YouTube members for supporting the channel. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you haven't already, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you guys in the next video.